Hi everyone, good afternoon. Let us start our webinar about startup studios. I'm going to explain just through a quick presentation of my screen the key features of our group of business angels. I will share my screen right away with you. So this is another webinar organized by our group of business angels. Me and George, we created this group a couple of years ago in order to spread the word about our work in financing startups, essentially startups located in Portugal, but some in Spain as well. This is my professional role, and is George's as well. Our mission as a group of business angels is basically to bring good investment opportunities and to spot good investment opportunities in new companies, in recent companies located in Portugal, in some different sectors. We are both certified business angels from the Portuguese authorities, IAPMEI. It is the Portuguese body that has the mission of accreditation of business angels. And by being accredited, it means obviously that we have experience in doing this kind of operations, this kind of investment operations, and we do. We have been doing this for many years. But then we are also entitled to work with public funds, in matching funds in order to support our operations, reducing our risk as investors, and leveraging the capital gains possibilities for the operations. We have a group of other business angels. We are specialized in terms of verticals. Most of our angels, or some of our angels, are specialists in the energy sector. But in the end, we are now doing some work in terms of other sectors, especially impact. So we position ourselves as impact investors. We have, as you're seeing in the screen, we have a past experience as regulated asset managers, both in Portugal and in Spain, investing in financial markets. Then me and George, we also have experience as angel investors for many years, and we have a special focus in some specific verticals as energy, agri-food, and everything related to impact investing and sustainability. It is our main focus of investment. In the last years, we in the end developed a kind of a startup ecosystem focused on impact again. But in our ecosystem, we have a group of angel investors, which we call VSM Investment Studio. We have investment vehicles. We have access to matching funds from now managed by Banco Português de Fomento, the Portuguese Development Bank. We have accelerators, startup accelerators. It's more or less one of the issues of today's presentation, the detail of this approach of accelerating startups. We have a pretty good network of having access to deal flow all over the Portuguese territory, including islands, Madeira and Açores. And we also have a team in place with the role of taking care of investor relations and reporting to investors, reporting from startups, helping investors in selling their stakes, and helping also vehicles in selling their stakes in the startups. We have an approach based on this B impact assessment when we can, when it is possible. It is, in our opinion, a very good way of assessing the real impact of an investment operation. ESG is in our DNA, as it's written in this slide above. Our group of angels has no financial commitment, so in order to join, you just have to have interest in startups, in entrepreneurship, and in impact, in making an impact. And it is an opportunity of knowing and learning from professional business angels as ourselves and other members of our group. This issue of startup studios, why is it important? In our opinion, obviously, we like to make investments. We prefer making investments in startups if those startups are integrated in some kind of supporting group. And the best way of supporting the launch of startups, in our opinion as investors, is the American model of startup studio. The probabilities of success are quite higher if you invest in a startup that is integrated in a startup studio than if you don't, if you invest in a startup that is an independent company not related to any one of these groups. Typically, we talk 70% failure ratios in startup investments, whereas in the startup studies, in the best ones, it's almost the other way around. It's almost the 70 to 80% success ratio. So we prefer to analyze startups that can reach us from startup studios. And that's the reason why we invited today two specialists in this issue. Both of them are members of our network. Marcos Lopes, he is in Oporto in Portugal. He is a digital transformation expert. And Miguel Fernandes. Miguel Fernandes is the CEO of Dengan Startup Studio, located in Faro in the Algarve, with several international connections. And so the idea today is to ask them to share their view and for us to learn something about this business model and how can this business model be interesting for us as investors in startups. Marcos, please go ahead and then share with us your thoughts on these issues.
Okay, thank you, Tiago. I don't know if you are already seeing my screen.
Yes, now.
Okay, thank you. So, as Tiago said, we are gathered here today to talk a little about this business model. What is these emerging trends in the entrepreneurial landscape that promises to become something revolutionary, and why is it so different from old models that we already know, like business angels, private investing, etc. So, in long story short, a startup studio is a company that builds companies. Okay, the model it can be very different models. What we have here in Portugal is very in the beginning. Okay, but the underlying concepts they are still diverging from a startup studio to other startup studios. But what we have in common with all the studios is that they are not only in one phase or one discipline of the startups, but they support with their internal resources and vast multidisciplinary teams. They support all the journey from seed or pre-seed to exits or scale up. What we have in terms of history since the latest 90s, beginning of the 20s, is that we have these venture builders that like angel investors that were not organized, and it was not real smart money. Okay, only money for seed and pre-seed. And the founders, who have the idea, they just have the money, but they don't know where to go after that. They go to a software house. They don't have someone taking care of the marketing and attraction journey. They don't know how they can get more money after that. So is the early stage of angel investors and venture capitalists, okay, where the organization is very weak and the know-how about all the journey that we need to do in a startup must be done internally. So then we have these accelerators They don't invest in the seed or pre-seed phase of the startups. They only invest on existing startups and they scale up. So there is this money for A series, Series A, and a lot of Silicon Valley's accelerators are focused on that kind of startups that are on this existing method. They have already an MVP, they have already or a proof of concept in the market, and they scale up. Startup studios are like the third wave, okay? What we have is that we always had the problem of the valley of death, and we know that all the old models, 90% of the startups fail. In terms of the numbers of the last 5 to 7 years of this new model of startup studios, we have that only 9% have failed. Okay, is completely different scenario. 3% exited, and the rest are still active. Okay, those companies on the startup studio models, they have an entry investment on average of 250 and generating a revenue of about 1 million a year. Okay, these are the real numbers from Gartner Group. So in a like a very light way to show it, what we have inside a startup, or what we have like the need to a startup to create a business with a winning business model. We have to have access to financial, human capital, infrastructures, and ideas and execution. So we have this kind of 6 facets of magic diamond. So what the founders need is the internal resources and the financial capital, space, and connections to do it. We have also the need to validate the idea, because some ideas can be not so good ideas. So they must trust this kind of decision steering committee to validation. Okay, from ideation to validation. They are in need of a structure for venture building, so access to money in the different phases of the startup. And also they need a team, not only an operational team that can execute the products or the service, but also a team that can go aside and go in a strategic way until the exits, or until a IPO, or until a scale up. So in these startup models, the models are just being discussed. So this is not a very mature team, and the startup studios models, they diverge. So you can just ask what is a team? Does we have a startup studio with a theme? Is it a B2B? Is it a B2C? Is a tech startup studio? Is it a health care startup studio? Is it an hybrid based model? This startup studio can make a tech product for health, can make a tech product for B2B or to B2C. So one of the things that is very important is to find the correct startup studio that will build your products, because we are talking about not only smart money, but smart expertise in one field. And as you know, we cannot be excellent in every field. So we just have to ask, what startup studio do we have to find? Okay. Another thing very important is that some startup studios, they just go for internal ideas only. So they generate these revenue streams to allocate, sorry, to internal ideas. And we have also these startup studios that goes to external ideas and hybrid models, okay? So they can accept internal ideas, but also external ideas in the teams or where they think they are best off. The first thing to interact with the startup studios is obviously the phase from ideation to validation. So normally we have this decision steering committee, we have operational structures inside the studio, and we have external partners like venture capitalists, business angels, etc. Okay. But as we saw on the diamond design, founders, they are looking for economics or funding, they are looking for product viability, sustainability. They just are trying to find the market needs, competitors, benchmarking. If there are resources to help this particular startup to grow, and the studios do validate the technology and do validate it with this internal know-how that is very, very, very important. Okay, so this is the first touch point with the startup studios. The next steps is when you have yes. So the ideation to validation is, let's go, let's invest on this startup. We have to talk about equity. Okay, so here there are a lot of models. We could spend 1 hour talking about this, but the normal negotiation between the founder and the startup studio is about 40 to 80% to the studio. It seems a lot, but the reason why is because the incubation model of startup studios is based on the studio providing all these resources, both human and capital resources, thus keeping the majority of equity as a compensation. And compensation also for the resource allocation, but also for the risk it represents. So what we are saying here is that the startup studio not only goes to allocate all the capital to make the product available to the market, but also the risk is for the startup studio. So the founder has no risk at all. Okay. In terms of funding, of course, the money is needed. So internal ideas, and if the startup studio works only with internal ideas, the money comes from the revenues, from the rolling stones, from the existing startups, for the existing exits. Okay, external ideas, the startup studios can go to partner with venture capitalists, business angels. They can talk with governmental and semi-governmental organizations, and they will take it all. They will take that kind of role, and they can go to this founding arena by themselves and take it all to what it is needed. So once again, venture capitals, business angels, or private investors are one way to for these studios to get the money, but also they have the cash from the existing exits and from the what we call the Rolling Stones, okay? What is happening inside and the history of the startup studios. They already have that kind of money, okay? In terms of exit models, we can be here also talking 1 hour about that, but mainly there are two kinds of exit strategies: the quick wins and the long run strategies. Some startup studios, they only focus in acquiring, in putting some startup in a position that they can be acquired quickly, generating enough cash to fund the new products, okay? Another strategy is to exit the studio and go alone to raise money with the studio brand as an important access. So in the quick win, they just go, they accelerate, they put the startup on this exit kind of status to be acquired quickly. And another strategy in this quick win is to make a quick exit, and the startups, that startup infrastructure can be alone in the markets. In the latter case, the long run, the objective is to grow each startup individually, professionally, various startups with synergies to exploit among themselves, to take over an entire market and enjoy long run profits. So here, the aim, the goal of the strategy of the startup studio is to keep that startups inside their infrastructure. Okay. What I think is that in the perspective of the small economies, entrepreneurial ecosystem like startup studios in Portugal, we are not already ready for big IPOs, big exits. So nowadays, what we see is that the startup studios are just working on the long run. Also, they are trying to make this strategy to go to big exits, but what we exist in Portugal for now is only long runs, and we are trying to shift it to quick wins. Is the maturity that we are seeing right now. Okay. So in terms of like, I think that I have my time. In terms of conclusion, a new model for startup creation is what is a startup studio. Okay, we are talking about smart money. We are talking about rocket science expertise with an efficient operational team or teams. We are talking about short go-to-market timeframes and reduced risks. Okay. So what is the real secret of the startup studio? Why can we do this way in this model? Because as we have the fabrics, as we have the expertise, as we have engineers, as we have marketing, as we have founding or venture capitals that we partner with, we also create reusable tools, reusable templates, database, technology, ecosystems, and partnerships that they are reusable. So that's why we can go to markets faster, and that's why we call it smart money. Okay, and the risk is also reduced because this is like a fabric. Okay, so we don't build technologies. Startup studios don't build only technologies. They really help founders build their business, going along the journey every step of the way. Okay, so this is I think that's the best that we can say about this startup studio model. So
okay, Marcos, thank you very much for this brief overview directly from Oporto. Thank you very much. I think you made it clear that it's preferable to invest or to support startups integrated in startup studios than on an isolated basis. And it would be also important for the country, for Portugal as a startup country, as the government wants it to be, to have better startup studios, more and better startup studios. There are lots of incubators and accelerators, but there's something strategic about improving the way they work in order to obviously to improve the probabilities of success of new startups, which would be very important for the country, in our opinion. Let's now move on, Marcos, if you allow me, move on to the Algarve, where Miguel is probably ready to explain us a little bit about his startup studio. In our opinion, one of the best startup studios in the country, in Portugal. And on top of that, Miguel is a very active person in the region, and he's also promoting something called Algarve Tech Hub, which I would ask him also to touch also that issue and to present us briefly what is he doing with the local authorities and university and so on in terms of dynamization of the local entrepreneurship. So Miguel, Dengan, Algarve, and please go ahead.
Thanks so much for the invitation, and I'll try and share my screen here. It's more a story. How long do I have, Thiago, just so that I can have here some control of the time?
20, 25.
So maybe I'll start with the studio here, and then if we have a bit of time, I can discuss a bit more about the Algarve Tech Hub. Is that okay? Thiago?
Yeah, please.
Or do you want me to start with the Algarve Tech Hub? What would you prefer?
Dengan.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So hi everyone, and thanks for being here on this afternoon, busy. So just a little bit of, I'll try to make this more a story and the road and the journey that we've been going through. Hopefully it will help some of you take some inspiration or maybe some ideas from what we're going to share here. Marcus did a great job. Thanks so much for that intro. Startup studios, the biggest issue is that I think they're not that well known, and it's really hard to a new category to break in if it's not clear, and to even make it more difficult. There's a lot of confusion in different names for the same thing. So startup studio, venture studio, startup factory. There's a bunch of keywords out there, and in my opinion, I may be mistaken, but I believe, and I've been looking into this for the last 4 or 5 years in a very intensive way, and they're all more or less the same thing, just different flavors. So I've always wanted to build a startup studio since I was 10, 11 years old. I didn't know what a studio was. So I've been finding and trying to find that category, I would say for the last 20 something years. And hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit how that happened in these last years. So I've built Dengan. We'll get a bit more into that. That was not the goal. My goal was to build startups. And here, I think it's important to understand the stories and the journeys. The origin of the stories tells a lot about what happened in the future. And hopefully that will be helpful to you guys. So I did grow up in Macau. I was in Asia until 99. I was building websites, and in the IRC, I fell in love with the internet. Everything was exploding. And I knew I wanted to build a .com, a startup that didn't exist at that time. But that was what I wanted to do. That was very clear when I was really, really young. I didn't know how, but at least a direction was there. And I came to Portugal to visit my grandparents, tried to build a startup with some friends out of university and failed miserably. Zero funding, zero ecosystem, all the normal things that startups have difficulties on moving forward. And then I decided that I needed to make money. And eventually, if I started building a business and making some money out of the profits, I would be able to build my own products. And that's why and how we started Dengen as a web development first, then software house, then mobile development and digital marketing. And if you think about this evolution, there wasn't mobile development in 2006, 2005. So we were building what we could do as custom software. And then even on
Miguel,
website, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, you're not sharing your screen. I think Marcos has to.
Oh, I did share. Let me just do something. No one would give me that information. Thank you, Marcos. It's very, very helpful. 1 second. Let's see if this works. Is this sharing it again?
No. No,
So
yeah,
I'll just,
yeah.
is it?
No.
So let's see. Is it sharing?
Yeah.
Everyone can see it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just hide these things here. Okie dokie. Sorry, guys, about that. So I'll continue. So again, I was reading through it, so hopefully you guys didn't lose a lot. Started in Macau, came to Portugal, tried to build a startup, didn't really work out that well, and then built a company to make money and build our own products. And that's what we've been doing, providing services on web development, software, and mobile came up in the market, digital marketing. And if I look at this in retrospective, we were building the pieces to build a startup studio, or at least the core engine of a startup studio that would build, for example, an MVP. Later, down the road, we ended up on the startup studio, but we didn't know this was there when we started in 2006. In 2014, we went to the international market and really invested because we wanted to prove ourselves that we could help and build products at the state of the art in Silicon Valley, New York. And hopefully I'll share a little bit about that. And in 2019, we kind of found our category and something we've been looking for many, many years. So let's just carry on. This is a little bit and what Marcos already said, so I will pass through it. It's a Swiss Army knife for the co-founder. If you're a founder, an entrepreneur, you have an idea and you want to start it, we see us or see a studio as the best co-founder in a lot of areas that could accelerate and mitigate the risk of you falling into the pitfalls that normally startups do. So a little bit about what we've been doing, and these are some of the projects in the international, especially after 2014, where we went to New York, Austin, and also the Bay Area. And the majority of clients, these ones are Bay Area, New York, these are New York based, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more about it. We've helped a lot of these companies struggle from building, for example, a POC to an MVP. Others, they had like broken MVPs that were not scaling. So we've been helping them on the marketing and engineering side. And this was more the focus in the last, I would say, four or 5 years. So for example, Big Room, it's a computer vision application that substitutes, for example, having 3 cameramans filming a live theater show. So it's all done by a machine, no operators, no editor, everything done by a black box that gets the information, and it would automate these things. So this was a very complex one. We had some more technology like responsibility here. And YouTube then kind of picked up and they use it because of the pandemic to stream live events through home. So what we've worked here and helped this startup kind of grow is from the backend, sysadmin, and especially here the different flavor was this AI and computer vision kind of part. This is another company that we are very proud to say we've helped them grow. They are one of the biggest HR tech companies in the world, like software software for HR, and we've helped them and been working with them from marketing, websites, the back-end development, mobile development, like the full, for example, Android app was developed by, and we've been helping them develop it for the last 5 years. And it's one of our longest partners, clients, that it's very hard to maintain these relationships with these startups. So, or you're adding value or you're not there. Thriller, it's by far our biggest case. Here, the case, it's very simple. When we met them like 3 years ago, these guys, they had close to 8 million users, and the platform was not scaling very well, was crashing, the mobile app. And we've helped them refactor that, and they grew in terms of international market from those 8 to 100 million. And now today they are a big player in the social apps and a competitor of TikTok and other social apps. So one of the most proudest moments we've had in the last years was when we proved ourselves that we could help these international companies, starting a company here in the south of Europe, specifically in the Algarve, and seeing that we were being elevated to one of the city status. And for a long time, I would say that this project was managed from the Algarve to the world, and we proved, at least to ourselves, that we could do it, and we were everything that we've been working for, it was there, and we were not being we were not thinking too much of ourselves. We were really doing it. This is just some other clients that we've been working internationally. To cut the long story short, as a startup studio, we really like to be in this innovation space. And more than anything, it's why do you wake up every day and go to work? And just thinking about different ways to approach challenges, to break the market, to guide entrepreneurs through this journey and mitigate the risk of them failing. It's something that, at least for me, was a big motivation to wake up every day. And if I could be working in this perpetual circle and trying to do something to help others achieve their goals, that I didn't find that category or that help when I was trying to build my startup, it's something that I think it's super interesting. And I really believe that there will be a lot more people trying to work in these different kind of machines of innovations that can mitigate this risk. So basically, from an idea, testing that idea, Marcos already shared a bunch about it, but how do you cross this chasm? How do you go then to an MVP, go to market? So it's not just tech and geeks and developers. You need salespeople, you need strategy, and this holistic combination of almost like a blueprint from idea to go to market that needs to be fine-tuned and improved every day if possible. So again, a company of startups developing ideas into products and products into companies. And I was lost and blocked on this for a very long time, being in an engineering kind of team. I wanted to build products. It's very different to build an MVP, a product, a tech software piece, than building a company. And the complexity of doing one and the other, it's just 10x. So it's much more difficult to look at it holistic. And that's when we found this like 4 or 5 years ago, that the Pandora box kind of opened, and we tried to reinforce and exercise our muscles in the other areas that we weren't as strong. And again, that's the only way to be in this business. Let me just check my time. Okay, cool. So Marcus covered this a little bit, and startup studios, there's different flavors in the different DNAs. We'll talk a little bit about ours, but I think this would be a very critical one. Do they just work with internal ideas, like in their own EIRs, so entrepreneurs in residence? Or do they, for example, just focus on external founders and teams? In our case, we are in this kind of hybrid way and approach, and I'll share more light into that in the next seconds. So in terms of phases, ideation, and what does this mean? So how do we source ideas? If we need to source 100 ideas, a studio and founders and entrepreneurs, what is the mechanisms and how we're going to do it? And it's a specific and very important part. But then let's say that we track these ideas. Do we have a clear value proposition? Does the founder knows how to do this? Can they do like a market research? How do we co-create and get this idea to a point that it's good enough to go through a validation process? So it's like a stage gate here. Then it's the validation, and I'll just share so that we can give some more examples on how we can do this. What is the best and the fastest way to validate that idea that went through that process, it's good enough to go into an MVP stage and invest a bunch of more time, money, resource. In this, it's I would say that a startup studio success rate, it's going to be very impacted a big part out of these two stages if they're not done in the best way possible. And doing this in the best way possible, it's how do we do these validation processes in the best and most efficient way. So, for example, not investing a lot of time into POCs and coding and developing using no-code, low-code tools, but even more than that, thinking a bit outside the box, using vaporware, using videos, using questionnaires, inquiries, using experts in the different areas that can help you validate this in a more efficient kind of way. How many minutes do I still have, Tiago? Just for my help, please, if you can.
10.
Just 10, good. So then creation, we went through these, let's say that we have validated 100 ideas. Out of those 100 ideas, we chose 50 to be validated. Out of those 50, now we have 6 ideas, and the studio is going to invest in these 6 ideas and assemble a development team, marketing team, with the founder and entrepreneur, or if it's an internal idea, with entrepreneur in residence, and we're going to assemble the first prototype. After that, we need to spin it out and go to the market, understand how it's going, and try to attract some traction, prove that the assumptions and the hypotheses that were defined in all of the prior processes can be validated. And if we get there and we get some traction, the startup should go on and scale up and exit the studio kind of nursery phase. So in terms of an investment thesis, we are starting and we would like to be a bit broader at this stage, but hospitality, growing up Dengen at the Algarve. So we have a lot of, it's the only thing that works in the only industry in the Algarve that has big enough representation. So hospitality, it's by far the one that we have more knowledge in terms of that vertical. Healthcare as well for specific R&D projects that has done, and blockchain and Web3, because it was an investment that we've done as a company in the last 4 or 5 years, believing that it has its fertile ground for future startups and for disruptive new startups with value. Our DNA, we are 50 plus team working at the studio. This includes the development team, the UX, UI team, the marketing team. So all of the pieces that we've been building and assembling to get to where we are today. The focus I've already shared, ideas in internal and external, so the hybrid kind of model. And this is a little bit of what I've just highlighted as I've shared with you guys just now. So trying and validate yearly 100 ideas, going through a validation process, selecting them, and then choosing to build 6 year by year, and having cohorts every year that we replicate, and we fine tune this process to mitigate risk and increase the chances of success for the founders and mitigate risks for the investors. So the structure here in terms of funding, it's a combination of internal funding from Dengen and external partners that want to match fund and want to co-invest in specific ideas. A little bit of projects and the track record. So the ones above, we have invested or raised investment and are under development. These ones are companies, startups that we've started. Again, as I've said, we've been always trying and working on building startups for the last 15 years. So it's not something that we only started to do it when we discovered that there was a category called Startup Studio. And some of them have succeeded, others haven't had the same amount of success, and we need to be pragmatic and to cut them. And when they're not reaching the KPIs and it doesn't, or it's not, they're not in time to move forward anymore. So the time has passed. Can share a little bit more about those startups if there's any interest, a little bit about the network. So we have, because we've been working internationally and we've been developing this strong network of experts, especially in the verticals that were mentioned above. The team, as we've said, it's 50 plus people, around 60 people that work on a day-to-day basis on building products, marketing, and this innovation. The 15 years, again, it's just the lifetime of Dengen, but some of the partners that I'll show below, they've been in this space for much, much longer than these last 15 years. The Algarve Tech Hub that Tiago asked me to mention, coming to the Algarve in 2001, 2002, and trying to build startups, it was very difficult. So after the crisis in 2010, the Algarve was not doing good, let's put it that way, very dependent on tourism. And I thought that something needed to be done. And this was a great place for companies and people to work and innovate from here to the world. Lifestyle wise, it's great weather, it's 300 days of sunshine. So why not position it in a different light? And then we started working with a bunch of partners locally, with the municipalities, with the University of the Algarve, and we've managed to attract and to have a regional plan to develop the region that we've been implementing and working in the last, I would say 6 to 5 years in a more intense way. I would suggest that you guys, if you want more information or anything about it, or you're interested, please visit the website. And another note, we're going to have the first Algarve Summit. So it should be our little web summit where we show the Algarve to the world. It's going to be in March 28. It's algarvesummit.com. Please look at it. And if you want to participate or you need any information, let me know. Would love to show you around and introduce you to the local ecosystem down here. In terms of startup operators, these are the core, more senior people with different roles that we have. Then we have, like, for example, so Paulo is more taking care of like the finance part. Luis is working in these, he has exited this technology company, so it's our head of engineering. Danielle been building mobile apps for the last 12 years, back-end development. So they're like the head of departments that each of them have their own team. Areas that we work, we're not good in all of them. So we're much stronger in product management, engineering, data science. Here, not so much, but the engineering, product management, recruiting, assembling teams, the marketing part, the company formation, and the other ones, we are looking for partners and reinforcing, as I've said, our muscles. No one is good at all these areas like immediately. So if there's any partners out there in these other areas, please reach out. It's only by working together we'll get there. I'll stop and shut up. I'm talking too fast and too much here, just with a message. Even before thinking that I wanted to build a startup studio, I thought that I believed so much that there needed to be a better model for innovation, that I was thinking that I was inventing a category that I was calling it digital growth partners. So that's, you need to be very convinced and invest your own money and time to do something like that. And then I was presenting this digital growth partner kind of presentation, super proud of what we've done and this new category that we were inventing. And there is a gentleman here in Portugal called André Marquet that he asked me, Miguel, isn't that a startup studio? And this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was exactly the same thing. And it was the best thing that happened, because then it's so much easier to build on top of something that others are doing it, and you're not like trying to create something on your own and evangelizing everyone. So I truly believe that the startup studios will bring a disruption to the innovation ecosystem, especially for early stage startups, because I think that the values are much more aligned with all of these stakeholders. So the startup studio is investing in the startup. It's not a vendor, a software house. And so it's aligned with the entrepreneur, with the investment stakeholders, and even with the team that will assemble these startups. And so if I could leave you guys with one idea, one thought, this would be the most interesting to me. It's the only player in the ecosystem category that I believe that it's fully aligned with the ecosystem's kind of values and interests. So that's a little bit, it was a lot. So hopefully some of it was interesting to you guys. Thank you for making the time to pass with us in this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Quite interesting indeed. Again, stress that there's going to be a summit in the Algarve. How is it? Algarve Web Summit, right?
It's Algarve Summit. I'll drop
Algarve
it down
Summit.
here.
Algarve Summit, March 28th. Is it going to be online or physical only?
It's going to be hybrid. So,
Hybrid.
But we would love to receive you guys in the Algarve. It's going to be hot and pleasant. So if you haven't visited, use that time to visit us if you guys can.
Thank you. Okay, I have two questions, one for each one of you. The first one is from Andrew, one of our guests, asking, in general terms, what's the equity percentage that a normal startup studio takes from the ideas that come from outside, from ideas from entrepreneurs? What's the typical agreement with the startup studio in terms of equity sharing? Okay, this is for Marcos. Then for Miguel, I'd like to ask how hard it is to find and hire and convince entrepreneurs in residence for internally generated startups. Maybe explain also what is an entrepreneur in residence. Marcos, you first.
So, as we said, every startup studio has their business model, and in terms of equity, is one of the issues. Okay, so in terms of equity, historical, and because I said it, all the risk is for the startup studio. The founder or the owner of the idea just presents the idea, just goes to the startup studio and asks for everything. He asks for technical approach, for validation, for market benchmarking, for go-to-market, for design, for UX, for UI, for everything. So normally and historical, the startup studios go to 50 to 80% of equity. But it depends on the startup studio business model for the equity, as I said. So Miguel will have to respond to answer for Dengan. But in historical terms, this is the numbers. Okay. Another thing that is very important, and it's not in terms of numbers, is the startup studios not only validate the idea of the founder, of the owner of the idea, but they also validate the owner. They also validate the founder. So imagine I'm a startup studio and I'm going to analyze an idea for someone that just have this idea and is not an expert of that team. So I will say 80% for us, 20% for you. But if that guy that exposes the idea is an expert, is like a doctor, as very important doctor with a PhD in something and goes to with an idea to health tech, to put an app, making something great, technology, but in these fields, of course, that we want the founder inside the projects. So we are not going to discuss equity of 80%, 20%. We are going to discuss equity of 50-50. So it's not only because the idea is good or is great, but also because of the founder, of the owner of the idea. Okay, but I can share this answer with Miguel, and probably he wants to say something else.
So those are the industry standards, and honestly, the only way I can answer this, it's going to be case by case, and it really depends on the value that the studio adds or the entrepreneur adds, and then those proportion, like Marcus was saying, needs to be defined. To share some light on the equity part of it, I would say that if it's an internal idea done with the internal team and the entrepreneur in residence, normally the studio gets more equity, if not most of the equity, divided it with the partners in the investment partners. If it's an external founder with a good idea and already like a seed team to it, it can go up to 10-15%. So it does vary depending on the value that the startup studio adds to that, and also the stage that startup is at. So that would be my. Go ahead.
Yeah, Miguel, and then and Marcus, any other fees involved? Because I assume this is a long-term project. Also, the typical maturity of a project until reach the go, no go decision. And are there any other fees involved?
Normally the startup studio model simplifies all that. So when we are talking with venture capitalists or business angels, normally we have a fee for consultancy, for technology consultancy, a fee for founding, a fee for etc. and etc. In startup studio models, this is simplified, and the equity is just like Miguel and I said earlier. So there are no fees. The equity is for the moment that the idea is validated, and once the idea is validated and goes until an exit phase, only in that exit phase, or when you want to scale up, that you are going again to talk with the founder, and again you are going to talk about equity and how we can arrange other kind of arrangement, because he also has this equity. It can be 20%, 50%. So only on an exit stage or on a scale-up stage, we are going to talk about equity again. So it's lots more simple than to talk with venture capitalists or business angels, etc. There are fees for everything. In the startup studios, the startup studio take it more equity for it, but it's simple. It's a simpler process. Okay.
Okay, Miguel, do you still remember my other question?
Yeah, so EIRs, I do think that it's trying to create artificially entrepreneurs or stimulating the creation of entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs in residence. Let's say that the startup studio just focus on internal ideas, so they don't work with external founders. So how do they create champions to lead these startups? Because if there's not someone that wakes up and breeds and just thinks about this thing, it's really hard for this to reach any chance of success. So one of the ways we've been doing it's in the last 10-15 years, identifying entrepreneurs and people in our network that would approach us, even developers that rose into EIRs, and we've been breeding them internally. Today we're working with management courses and the local ecosystem as the Algarve Tech Hub to start adding product management, project management, and these all in the entrepreneurship classes within the university to try and stimulate and attract these EIRs. Another way to do it is you can do calls and try to define the role of people that have this entrepreneurial and start doing some headhunting and understanding who they are, having a more active presence, for example, on LinkedIn. So I would say for the startup studios, fixing in someone that has ideas on creating or finding EIRs, it will propel the model and it will unlock of possibilities. That's a hard one to fix. So anyone that has ideas and suggestions to brainstorm, I think that would give a great next call, Tiago.
Good, thank you very much, Miguel. I have a final question for you, Miguel. And we'll conclude the webinar. The final question is, how do you see yourself and your company in 5 years? What will you be doing in 5 years?
The dream and the vision is that we are turning over cohorts of 6 startups, and if 3 of them are successful and we exit them for us and our investors and the founders, I would be a very happy person. So that's the vision, and we have a core machine that knows how to build the technology and mitigate a lot of the risks. We're looking for partners such as people potentially in this call, so that we can create this group that we invest in early stage and create a blueprint that increases the chances of early stage disruptive tech startups to have a chance of succeeding and getting traction and being successful business that add value to the market. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's at least the way I wake up.
Planning to do something outside the Algarve, or?
The Algarve, it's just on planet Earth. So like we work, it is. I know it looks like paradise, but it's still on our planet. But either way, like we don't consider ourselves, we believe that we are first on planet Earth, and then we chose to live in the Algarve. So every startup and every idea should be across borders, regional time frames. That's in our core the definition of a proper tech startup to grow. So we don't touch or invest on anything that would be localized.
What about the vision for the country as a whole in this sense?
That's another webinar, Tiago, and I would love to share some ideas on that.
I'm talking about politics in the startup sector specifically. How can we as a country have more success in creating good startups and profitable startups?
I know this is going to sound wrong, but I truly believe that the startup studio, it's probably it's what I wake up and think, so it's hard for me not to say it, but it can be a catalyzer for meaningful startups to appear, because incubators, accelerators, all these, the ecosystem, they're great and add a lot of value, but I believe we need a more linear, integrated system for startups to come into a blueprint and go out in a more systematic way and more hands-on. So I would say that if we do that, there will be more meaningful startups. And the big problem is that they will get to a certain point and then they will get their headquarters, the financial problems that we know. Most unicorns in Portugal are not Portuguese, unfortunately. So that I don't know how to fix, but I would say that's the hard thing, because we already have a lot of innovation in Portugal. With the studio model, potentially we'll be able to create clusters of innovations in other areas, and that will just inflate it.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Miguel from the Algarve and Marcos from Porto. Thank you both for sharing your views with us. And also I thank all the members attending, all the people attending, and I hope to see you soon in one of our next webinars. If you have any doubts, let us know. And thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Yeah, have a good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. See you soon.
See you soon.